My mother-in-law handed out brand new iPhones to all her grandchildren at the family gathering, but she gave my son an iPhone box filled with dog poop. My son burst into tears, and my mother-in-law laughed like a horse. That's when I stood up and said loudly, "Before we continue, please write what you did today, whether you subscribed to the channel and liked it. Enjoy the story." I woke up to the insistent ringing of my alarm clock. Dawn was barely breaking outside the window, and the gray winter morning promised nothing cheerful. Next to me slept Gerald, snoring rhythmically with his back turned to the wall. We've been together for 4 years now, but sometimes it seems to me that he's still a stranger. Quietly slipping out from under the blanket, I threw on a warm robe and headed to the kitchen. Today was a special day, the traditional winter family gathering at Gerald's mother Patricia's house. Twice a year, winter and summer, all relatives gathered at her large suburban home for a children's celebration, supposedly to delight the grandchildren. In reality, these gatherings always turned into a demonstration of Patricia's power over the entire family. I didn't like these get-togethers, but Gerald insisted on our presence. Putting the kettle on, I took out breakfast ingredients from the refrigerator. My thoughts involuntarily returned to the upcoming gathering. My son Christopher, a 10-year-old boy from my first marriage, always ended up in an awkward position. Patricia never hid her attitude toward us. A daughter-in-law with baggage was not the match she had planned for her only son. "Mom, why are you up so early?" A sleepy Christopher appeared in the kitchen doorway, his chestnut hair sticking up in all directions. Getting ready for the trip to Grandma Patricia's, I tried to make my voice sound carefree, but my son looked at me too perceptively for his age. "Can I stay home?" he asked quietly, sitting down at the table. "I haven't finished my math homework." I sighed, placing a plate of scrambled eggs in front of him. "You know Gerald will be upset. He wants us all to be together." Christopher lowered his eyes, poking at his food with a fork. "Grandma Patricia pretends I don't exist. I'm like a ghost to her." His words struck painfully at my heart. A 10-year-old child had described the situation so accurately. My mother-in-law really tried not to notice my son, addressing only her biological grandchildren. "Chris!" I sat down next to him, putting my arm around his shoulders. "It doesn't matter how Grandma Patricia treats you. What matters is that Mom, Dad Gerald, and all your cousins love you." Christopher looked up. His gray eyes looked at me with an unchildlike seriousness. "Dad Gerald doesn't love me, Mom. He just tolerates me because he loves you." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. My son saw what I had been trying so hard not to notice all these years. Gerald really never showed any particular attachment to Christopher. Not that he was a bad stepfather. He didn't hurt the boy, dutifully bought him everything he needed, sometimes even played with him. But real paternal love never developed between them. "That's not true," I lied. "Gerald just doesn't know how to show his feelings well." Christopher shrugged with the look of someone who wouldn't be fooled by such excuses. But he didn't argue. At 10 years old, he had already learned to accept life as it was, with all its injustices and compromises. "Come on, finish eating and go get ready," I ruffled his hair. "Wear that new shirt we bought last week. Why dress up for people who don't care about you?" Christopher muttered, but still obediently finished his breakfast and went to get dressed. When Gerald came into the kitchen, I was already washing dishes. Tall, with receding hairline at his temples, at 42, he still maintained the athletic figure he had been so proud of in his youth. "Good morning." He reached for a cup of coffee. "Are you getting ready already?" "Yes, we're leaving in an hour," I nodded, drying my hands. "Gerald, I wanted to talk about today." My husband looked at me questioningly, taking a sip of coffee. "Your mother, you see how she treats Christopher. Every time she manages to make it clear that my son is a stranger to her." Gerald winced, looking away. "Elena, let's not start. Mom's not young anymore. She has her own ideas about family." She just doesn't see Christopher as a real grandson. Nothing we can do about it. Nothing we can do about it? I felt anger boiling inside. Your mother deliberately humiliates a child. And you? You don't care. I do care, Gerald answered wearily. But I can't change her. She is who she is. It's better just not to pay attention. I wanted to say something else, but at that moment Christopher returned to the kitchen, already dressed in dark blue pants and a light blue shirt. How do I look? He asked, clearly trying to appear carefree. Great, buddy. Gerald patted him on the shoulder and immediately switched to his phone, checking messages. An hour and a half later, we were already pulling up to Patricia's house, a spacious two-story mansion behind a high fence. After her husband's death 5 years ago, Patricia received a good inheritance, a chain of auto repair shops throughout the city, and now lived large, denying herself nothing. Relatives' cars already filled the driveway. After parking, Gerald took out bags of groceries we had brought at his mother's request, and we headed to the house. Patricia met us in the entrance hall. At 65, she looked younger, slender, with short-cut chestnut hair streaked with rare gray strands, dressed in an elegant ivory pantsuit. Gerald, honey. She opened her arms, her face lighting up with genuine joy. Gerald hugged his mother, kissing her on the cheek. Hi, Mom. Here's everything you asked for. Thank you, dear. Patricia took the bags and turned to me. Hello, Elena. Her gaze slid over me without interest and stopped on Christopher. Oh, and the boy came too, she said in a tone as if speaking about an inanimate object. Well, come in. Everyone's already gathered. The spacious living room was noisy and crowded. Gerald's brother with his wife and 3 children, his sister with her husband and teenage daughter, cousins, aunts, uncles, about 20 people in total. Children of various ages ran around the room, playing tag. Adults clustered in groups, discussing the latest news. Christopher, my son, was called by Paul, Gerald's brother's son, a boy about the same age. Come on, we're playing video games over here. Christopher looked at me gratefully and ran off to the far corner of the living room, where children with game controllers were gathered in front of a large TV. I looked around for Gerald, but he had already disappeared, as always, gone to talk with his brother about men's things. Left alone, I headed to the kitchen to help with preparations. Patricia's kitchen was spacious and bright, with the latest appliances and a huge island in the middle. The wives of Gerald's brothers and sisters were already bustling about, cutting salads and arranging appetizers. Elena, you're just in time. Irene, Gerald's brother's wife, handed me a cutting board and knife. Please chop the olives for the salad. I nodded and got to work, listening to the conversation. Patricia will surprise everyone with her gifts again, said Sandra, a cousin's wife. Last time the kids got bicycles. Now something even more grandiose. Yes, generosity is in her blood, Irene chimed in. My kids still use those tablets she gave them last year. I silently chopped olives, feeling a pang of anxiety. Last time, Christopher was the only child who didn't receive a real gift from Patricia. She gave all the grandchildren expensive bicycles, but my son got a cheap board game that, as I later learned, had been given to her by work colleagues years ago. Christopher, of course, understood everything but didn't show it, just quietly shrugged when I asked if his feelings were hurt. Where's Patricia? I asked, finishing with the olives. In her office, Irene replied, preparing the surprise. An hour later, everything was ready. The long table in the living room was laden with appetizers, salads, cold cuts, hot dishes, desserts. Patricia loved to impress guests with abundance. The children, having run around enough, were seated at a separate, smaller table, while the adults settled at the main one. May I have your attention? Patricia's voice rang out over the noise of conversation. Everyone fell silent, turning to face her. As you know, our family tradition is to gather twice a year, she began, surveying everyone with a satisfied smile. And each time I try to make sure our children, our grandchildren, feel special. She made a theatrical pause. This year, I've prepared something truly special. Something that will help our children stay connected in the modern world. My heart sank. I had a bad feeling about this. Patricia snapped her fingers, and two assistants appeared carrying a large box. They began pulling out smaller boxes, elegant white packages with the unmistakable Apple logo. The latest iPhone 15 Pro Max. Patricia announced triumphantly, "For each of my grandchildren." The living room exploded with exclamations and applause. Children jumped up from their table, their eyes shining. Paul, Emily, Thomas, Jessica, Michael, Sophia. Patricia called out the names one by one, handing each grandchild a coveted box. Christopher sat motionless at the children's table, his face expressionless. I watched my mother-in-law, feeling my heart pound harder with each name called. Finally, all the children received their gifts. Patricia looked around with satisfaction. "Wait, Grandma!" Paul called out. "What about Chris?" Patricia turned her gaze to Christopher, as if noticing him for the first time. "Oh, yes, the boy," she said with feigned surprise. "Of course, I didn't forget him either." She reached into the box and pulled out another white package with the Apple logo. "Christopher, come here," she beckoned with her finger. My son slowly stood up and approached. I saw his hands trembling slightly. He was preparing for humiliation, but trying to maintain dignity. Patricia handed him the box. Christopher took it, quietly said thank you, and was about to return to his seat. Wait. Patricia stopped him. "Aren't you going to open it? Everyone else is opening theirs." Around us, children were already excitedly pulling new phones out of boxes, examining them, comparing colors. Christopher carefully lifted the lid of his box and froze. The silence that followed was deafening. I immediately understood something was wrong and rushed to my son. Inside the elegant Apple box, instead of a phone, lay a pile of dog feces, fresh, smelly, with flies beginning to circle around. "What is this?" Christopher's voice trembled. Tears welled up in his eyes, though he was trying hard not to cry. Patricia burst into laughter, a loud, grating laugh that seemed to fill the entire house. "Oh my God, you should see your face," she wheezed between laughs. "I've been planning this for 2 months. Brilliant, isn't it?" Some relatives nervously chuckled. Others looked away in embarrassment. Gerald's brother smirked. His wife Irene covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hide a smile. But Gerald just sat there, red as a lobster, not knowing where to look. And then I snapped. I stood up from the table. My chair fell with a crash, but I didn't notice. Something inside me finally broke free from the shackles of politeness and forced smiles. "That's enough." My voice rang out so loudly that the laughter immediately stopped. Everyone stared at me. Patricia stopped smiling, her eyebrows raised in surprise. "What did you say?" she asked icily. "I said enough." I repeated, approaching Christopher and hugging him by the shoulders. "Your cruel jokes, your deliberate humiliation of my child ends today." "How dare you?" Patricia began, but I interrupted her. "No, how dare you?" I felt my whole body trembling, but not from fear, from righteous anger. "You invited a 10-year-old child to a family celebration to publicly humiliate him? To give him dog feces while other children receive expensive gifts worth $1,000. This is MY house," Patricia hissed, "and these are MY grandchildren. If you don't like something, you can leave." "Your grandchildren?" I laughed bitterly. "Look at them. Look at how scared they are. You've taught them that cruelty is funny, that humiliating others is acceptable." I looked around the room at all the relatives. "And you all just sit there and laugh? Or pretend nothing is happening? This child," I hugged Christopher tighter, "is part of this family, whether you like it or not. He's Gerald's son, my son. And I will not allow anyone, including you, Patricia, to treat him like garbage. Gerald finally stood up. His face was pale. Elena, maybe we should calm down. Calm down. I turned to him. Your mother just gave our son dog shit as a gift, and you want me to calm down? Where were you when your child needed you? Where was your protection? Your support? Gerald opened his mouth, but no words came out. You know what? I took Christopher's hand. We're leaving, and we're not coming back until everyone in this house learns basic human respect. Good riddance. Patricia shouted after us. Don't ever come back. I don't need you or your bastard. I stopped, turned around, looked Patricia straight in the eyes. You're a pathetic, spiteful old woman, I said quietly but clearly. You have money, you have a big house, you have relatives who dance to your tune. But you know what you don't have? Love. Real love. Because love can't be bought and it can't be demanded. It can only be earned. And you, with your cruelty and arrogance, have forever lost the chance to earn it from the most wonderful child I know. We left under the stunned silence. Christopher didn't cry, though I saw tears streaming down his cheeks. He just squeezed my hand and walked alongside me to the car. Gerald caught up with us in the driveway. Elena, wait. Get in the car, I said coldly. We'll talk at home. The drive back passed in silence. Christopher sat in the back seat, looking out the window. Gerald nervously drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. I just stared straight ahead, replaying the scene in my head. When we got home, I immediately went to the bathroom to wash the smell of feces off Christopher's hands. He stood silently, letting me fuss over him. Mom, he finally said when I was drying his hands with a towel. Thank you. For what, honey? For standing up for me. No one has ever done that before. I hugged him, finally allowing myself to cry. I'm your mother, I whispered into his hair. I'll always stand up for you. Always. I'm sorry it took me so long to find the courage. Gerald was waiting for us in the living room. When we came out of the bathroom, he stood up. Elena, we need to talk. Yes, we do, I nodded, sending Christopher to his room. We really need to talk. When we were alone, Gerald sat down heavily on the couch. You humiliated my mother in front of the entire family, he said quietly. Your mother humiliated our son, I retorted. There's a difference. She was joking. Dog shit is not a joke, Gerald. I exploded. It's bullying. It's cruelty. And the fact that you can't see, that terrifies me. Gerald ran his hands over his face. What do you want me to do? She's my mother. I can't just. Choose, I said firmly. Either you're with us, with me and Christopher, or you're with her. There's no middle ground anymore. You're forcing me to choose between my mother and you? No, I shook my head. I'm forcing you to choose between right and wrong, between protecting a child and tolerating abuse. And if you can't make that choice, then maybe we need to reconsider our entire marriage. The silence hung heavy between us. Gerald sat with his head in his hands, and I waited, feeling my heart ready to burst. I need time to think, he finally said. Fine, I agreed. But while you're thinking, Christopher and I will be living our lives. And if you decide that your mother's approval is more important than your family's well-being, then don't bother coming back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to Gerald's breathing in the next room. He had chosen to sleep on the couch. I thought about what I had done, about whether I had the right to give such an ultimatum. But then I remembered Christopher's face when he opened that box. The tears he tried so hard to hold back. The humiliation in his eyes. And I knew I had done the right thing. The next few days were tense. Gerald barely spoke to me. He would come home from work, eat dinner in silence, and go back to the living room to watch TV. Christopher noticed the tension, but didn't ask questions. He just stuck closer to me, as if afraid I might leave too. On the third day, Gerald finally spoke. "I called my mother," he said during breakfast. "I put down my coffee cup waiting. I told her what she did was unacceptable, that she crossed a line. And I prompted. And she hung up on me." Gerald gave a bitter laugh. "Then she called back and said if I don't apologize, both of us, for the scene you made, she'll disinherit me." "I see," I said calmly. "And what did you say?" Gerald looked at me, and for the first time in days, I saw real emotion in his eyes. "I told her to do whatever she wants, that my son is more important than her money." My heart skipped a beat. "Your son?" "Our son," Gerald corrected himself. "Christopher is our son, not your son from a previous marriage. Our son. And I should have said that 3 years ago when we got married." Tears sprang to my eyes. "Gerald." "I'm sorry, Elena," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I've been a coward. I let my mother treat Christopher like he didn't matter because I was afraid of confrontation. I let her poison our family because it was easier than standing up to her." He stood up and came over to me, taking my hands. "You were right. About everything. And I don't know if I can ever fully make up for what I've allowed to happen. But I want to try, if you'll let me." I looked into his eyes and saw genuine remorse. "And hope. We're a family," I said softly. "Families forgive. Families fight for each other. And families don't give up on each other." Gerald pulled me into his arms, and we stood there in the kitchen, holding each other as the morning sun streamed through the windows. "I love you," he whispered. "And I love Christopher. He's my son in every way that matters." That evening, Gerald sat down with Christopher for serious talk. I listened from the kitchen, pretending to do dishes, but actually straining to hear every word. "Chris, I owe you an apology," Gerald began. "It's okay," Christopher said quickly. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Gerald interrupted. "I've been a terrible father to you. Not because I don't care, but because I was too much of a coward to stand up to my own mother, to protect you the way a father should." There was a long pause. "I want that to change," Gerald continued. "If you'll give me a chance, I want to be a real dad to you. Not just the guy who lives with your mom. A real father who shows up to your games, helps with your homework, and most importantly, has your back no matter what." I peeked around the corner and saw Christopher wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "Do you really mean it?" His voice was small, vulnerable. "I really mean it," Gerald said firmly. "And I'm going to prove it to you. Every single day." Christopher launched himself at Gerald, wrapping his arms around him. And Gerald hugged him back, tight and fierce, the way a father should. I quietly returned to the kitchen, smiling through my tears. The following weeks brought changes. Gerald started picking Christopher up from school, attending his soccer practice, helping with homework. At first, Christopher was hesitant, as if waiting for Gerald to lose interest or revert to his old, distant self. But Gerald persevered, showing up consistently, proving through actions what he'd promised in words. Patricia tried calling several times. Gerald didn't answer. She sent text messages full of guilt trips and manipulation. He deleted them without reading after the first few. Finally, she sent a formal letter from her lawyer, informing him that he was being cut out of her will. Gerald showed me the letter with a shrug. "Honestly, I don't care. We'll be fine without her money. Are you sure?" I asked, searching his face for any regret. "I've never been more sure of anything," he said. "What we have, you, me, Christopher, that's worth more than all her money combined." But the story didn't end there. About 3 weeks after the infamous family gathering, my phone rang. It was Irene, Gerald's sister-in-law. "Elena," her voice was urgent. "Something happened at school." My heart dropped. "Is Christopher okay?" "Physically, yes. But you need to know. Patricia came to his school today." "What?" "She showed up during lunch and caused a scene in the cafeteria. Started telling everyone that Christopher was a little bastard, that he didn't deserve to be part of the family. She was screaming, Elena, in front of all the kids. I felt cold all over. Where's Christopher now? The principal called security and had her removed. Christopher is in the counselor's office. The school is trying to reach Gerald, but his phone is off. I'm on my way, I said, already grabbing my keys. I found Christopher in the counselor's office, looking small and devastated. The counselor, a kind woman named Mrs. Henderson, gave me a sympathetic look. Your son handled it with remarkable composure, she said, but I think he's in shock. I knelt in front of Christopher, taking his hands. Baby, are you okay? He nodded, but his eyes were glazed. Everyone heard, he whispered. Everyone now knows. Knows what? That I'm not really part of the family. That I'm just extra baggage. My heart shattered. That is not true, I said fiercely. You are absolutely part of our family. What that woman did today, showing up here, saying those horrible things, it doesn't make any of it true. It just makes her cruel and desperate. But everyone heard her. Christopher's voice cracked. Tomorrow at school, everyone will be talking about it. He was right, and I knew it. Middle school kids could be brutal, and this kind of ammunition was social suicide. Then we'll deal with it, I said firmly. Together. You, me, and Dad, Gerald. We're a team, remember? Christopher looked up at me, eyes swimming with tears. Do you really think Dad, Gerald cares? Maybe Grandma, Patricia, was right. Maybe he's just pretending. Absolutely not. Gerald's voice boomed from the doorway. We all turned to see him standing there, face flushed, breathing hard like he'd been running. I got here as fast as I could, he said, striding into the room. He knelt down next to me, facing Christopher. Listen to me very carefully, son. What my mother did today was unforgivable. And I want you to know I'm pressing charges. Harassment, trespassing on school property, emotional abuse of a minor. All of it. Christopher's eyes widened. Really? Really? No more Mrs. Nice Guy. No more. She's family, so we have to put up with it. She crossed a line, and there will be consequences. Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat. The school is also filing a restraining order. Patricia Connors is permanently banned from this campus. Gerald nodded approvingly. Then he looked at Christopher, his eyes intense. I know I haven't always shown it, but you are my son. Not by blood, but by choice. And sometimes, choice is more powerful than blood, because blood is an accident of birth. But choosing to love someone, choosing to protect them, choosing to call them your own, that's deliberate. That's real. Christopher's dam finally broke. He threw himself into Gerald's arms, sobbing. Gerald held him tight, one hand cradling the back of his head. It's going to be okay, Gerald murmured. We're going to get through this. I promise. The principal, Dr. Martinez, appeared in the doorway. Mr. and Mrs. Connors, I'd like to discuss what happened today and what steps we're taking to support Christopher. We spent the next hour in meetings with the school administration. They were taking the incident very seriously. Patricia's screaming tirade had traumatized not just Christopher, but several other students who witnessed it. The school counselor would work with Christopher. His teachers would be briefed and asked to watch for any bullying. And the school resource officer had already taken statements for the police report Gerald was filing. When we finally left the school, it was late afternoon. Christopher was exhausted, emotionally drained. We decided to order pizza and have a quiet night at home. But as we were driving, Christopher suddenly spoke up. Dad. Gerald glanced in the rearview mirror. Yeah, buddy. You called me son at the school. I did. Did you mean it? Gerald pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned around to face Christopher. I meant every word. Christopher, would it be okay with you if I officially adopted you? Made it legal? So you'd be Christopher Connors for real on paper and everything. Christopher's face lit up like the sun. Really? You want to adopt me? More than anything, Gerald said, his voice thick with emotion. If you'll have me as your dad. Yes. Christopher was practically bouncing in his seat. Yes, yes, yes. I couldn't help the tears streaming down my face. This was what I'd hoped for, dreamed of, but never thought would actually happen. Gerald got out of the car, opened the back door, and pulled Christopher into a fierce hug. Then it's settled. We'll start the paperwork next week. The adoption process took 6 months. Christopher's biological father, who hadn't been in the picture for years, had to be located and convinced to sign away his parental rights. Surprisingly, he agreed without much fuss. Apparently, he'd started a new family and was happy to sever all legal ties to his past. Patricia's harassment didn't stop. She called Child Protective Services with false reports. She sent letters to Christopher's school alleging that we were unfit parents. She even tried to convince other family members to testify against us. But it all backfired spectacularly. The police pressed charges for her incident at the school. The judge, hearing about her pattern of harassment, issued a restraining order. She was required to stay at least 500 feet away from Christopher, our home, and his school at all times. Several family members, disgusted by her behavior, reached out to us privately to apologize and offer support. Gerald's brother even testified on our behalf during the restraining order hearing, describing years of his mother's manipulative and cruel behavior. And then about 4 months into the adoption process, Patricia had a massive stroke. Gerald got the call from his brother. She had collapsed at home, alone. By the time the ambulance arrived, significant damage had been done. She survived, but she would need extensive rehabilitation and long-term care. I should go see her, Gerald said, but his voice was uncertain. Do you want to? I asked gently. He was quiet for a long moment. Part of me does. She's my mother. But another part. He trailed off. You don't owe her anything, I said softly. After everything she's done, no one would blame you for walking away. But I'd blame myself, Gerald said. I'd always wonder if I could have been the bigger person. Then go, I said. But take your time. You don't have to decide anything right now. Gerald didn't go to see her immediately. Instead, he waited 2 months until the adoption was finalized and Christopher was officially, legally his son. The day we left the courthouse with the adoption papers, Christopher was flying high. He insisted we go to his favorite restaurant to celebrate. He wanted to tell everyone his new, full legal name. Christopher James Connors, he kept saying, trying it out. I'm Christopher James Connors now. How does it feel? I asked, watching him glow with happiness. Like I finally belong somewhere, he said simply. It was after that celebration that Gerald decided to visit his mother. But he went with Christopher. I want her to see, he explained. I want her to understand that her cruelty didn't win. That we became a family in spite of her, not because of her. They came back from the hospital quiet, but at peace. What happened? I asked. She can't really talk much yet, Gerald said. But she looked at the adoption papers I showed her. And Christopher. He turned to our son. You want to tell Mom what you did? Christopher smiled. I told her I forgave her. My jaw dropped. You what? I told her I forgave her for being mean. That I didn't want to carry around hate in my heart. And that even though she tried really hard to make me feel like I didn't belong, I do belong now. And nothing she did could change that. I looked at this incredible child, my son, Gerald's son, and felt overwhelming pride. What did she do? I asked. She cried, Christopher said, just tears running down her face. And I think she tried to say sorry, but the words wouldn't come out. Gerald nodded. It was probably the first genuine moment of remorse she's ever shown. Whether it was real or just self-pity, I don't know. But Christopher handled it with more grace than anyone in my family has ever shown. Life moved on. Patricia remained in a rehabilitation facility, slowly recovering but never fully regaining her independence. Her business was taken over by Gerald's brother, who ran it efficiently and fairly. We maintained cordial relationships with most of Gerald's family, though some chose to side with Patricia and cut ties with us. That was fine. We learned that sometimes family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when it matters. Christopher thrived. The kids at school, who tried to bully him about the cafeteria incident, quickly found that he had a supportive family who wouldn't tolerate harassment, and teachers who actively protected him. The bullying died out within a few weeks. More importantly, Christopher and Gerald's relationship blossomed. They became true father and son, sharing inside jokes, attending sports games together, working on homework side by side. Gerald never regretted standing up to his mother or being cut out of her will. "I gained so much more than I lost," he would say. And he was right. We had built something real, something authentic. A family not bound by obligation or blood, but by choice and love. 2 years after that fateful family gathering, Patricia died from complications of a second stroke. At her funeral, Christopher stood next to Gerald, serious and solemn. He placed a bouquet of wildflowers on her casket. "Why did you do that?" I asked him later. "After everything she did to you?" Christopher looked at me with wisdom beyond his years. "Because holding on to anger would only hurt me, Mom. She was broken in ways I'll never understand. But I'm not going to let her brokenness break me." At 12 years old, he understood something many adults never learn. That night, as we sat together as a family, me, Gerald, and Christopher, I realized that sometimes the worst experiences can lead to the greatest transformations. Patricia's cruelty had forced us to make a choice. We chose each other. We chose love over convenience, unity over approval, integrity over inheritance. And in doing so, we became the family we were always meant to be. Not perfect, not without our struggles and challenges, but real, authentic, built on a foundation that no amount of cruelty or manipulation could shake. As I looked at Gerald and Christopher laughing together over a board game, I thought about that moment at the family gathering when I stood up and confronted Patricia. It had felt terrifying in the moment, like burning bridges I could never rebuild. But I wasn't burning bridges. I was freeing us from chains. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries, especially when it's hard, even when it costs you something. Because what you gain, self-respect, authentic relationships, freedom, is worth infinitely more than what you lose. Christopher grew up knowing he was loved, truly loved, not tolerated but chosen. He grew up watching his mother fight for him and his father transform for him. He grew up understanding that family is built through commitment and action, not just accidents of biology. And years later, when he had children of his own, he raised them with the same fierce, protective love we had shown him. He chose to be the kind of parent who shows up, who fights, who never makes a child feel like they're extra baggage. The legacy Patricia intended to leave was one of wealth and power. The legacy she actually left was the opposite, a lesson in what not to do, how not to treat people, how not to value things over relationships. And sometimes that's the most valuable lesson of all, because we learned to be better. We chose to be better. Not for her, but despite her. And in the end, that's what mattered most.